We grew up together, and I knew him in my old hometown, Liverpool. And we just had so many beautiful times together that's what I'm going to remember him by.
At 83, Sir Paul McCartney, the legendary musician who helped write the soundtrack of the 20th century, has reached a stage in life where reflection flows as easily as music. He's lived through fame, fortune, and deep personal loss. But few relationships carried as much emotional weight as the one he shared with George Harrison. For decades, fans wondered about the true story behind their friendship, often clouded by pride and rivalry. Now, in his later years, Paul is speaking openly, with the gentle honesty of a man ready to tell the final truth. Paul's journey began when he met John Lennon in 1957. John was impressed by Paul's musical talent and invited him to join his band, the Quarrymen. This meeting is one of the most important moments in music history. Together, Lennon and McCartney created one of the most successful songwriting partnerships ever, defining an entire generation with their songs. When the Beatles exploded in the early 1960s, Paul was vital to their unique sound as the bassist and one of the lead singers. His melodic bass lines and ability to write both soft ballads, Yesterday, and energetic rock songs, Hey Jude, made him essential. While John often brought the rebellious, edgy side, Paul brought the beautiful melodic touch, creating the perfect balance that was the Beatles' genius. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, Paul faced the task of rebuilding his life. He found a strength and success with his late wife, Linda Eastman, forming the band Wings. Paul's capacity for love and resilience was tested by Linda's tragic death, and later through the complexity of subsequent relationships. This long life, marked by deep love, intense loss, and continuous music making, is key. It shows that the man now speaking at 83 is not the young, competitive Beatle, but a reflective elder ready to share his final, deepest truth. Now at 83, Paul is finally ready to speak candidly about the complex relationship he had with George Harrison. He speaks with the clear perspective that only time can bring, moving past the official history to the personal reality. George was like a little brother to me, Paul admits. When we were young, I always felt protective of him. He was the youngest in the group, but he had this quiet confidence. You couldn't push him around for long. Paul recalls George getting into the Quarrymen. He actually auditioned for us on the top deck of a bus. Paul says he played raunchy perfectly. John was hesitant because George was a bit younger. But I pushed for him because I knew he had the talent. Paul looks back at their early touring days, recalling George's talent. He was always experimenting, Paul says. He was the first of us to really get into Indian music and sitar, which completely changed the sound of albums like Sgt. Pepper's and Revolver. He'd find a chord none of us had ever used before, and suddenly the whole song would change. But Paul also acknowledges the tension. As the Beatles became more famous, Paul's drive and George's desire for his own artistic voice often clashed. This creative struggle became public knowledge during the filming of the Let It Be sessions, where friction between Paul and George over song arrangements was clearly visible. I was probably too bossy, Paul concedes with a meaningful smile. I had this vision of how things should sound, and sometimes I didn't give George enough space to express himself. There was this unspoken rivalry with John and me. We were the main guys, and that had to hurt him. Looking back, I wish I'd encouraged him more. This is the central truth. Paul admits his own role in George's frustration at being overlooked by the Lennon-McCartney focus. But Paul acknowledges George's genius. George had these incredible songs. Something, Here Comes the Sun. He was creating masterpieces while John and I were still dominating the track lists. And when I heard them, I realized he didn't need anyone's approval. He'd found his voice. The most emotional part of the story is the end of their friendship. When George was battling cancer, the two reunited privately, setting aside all the old arguments. We sat together for hours just talking and holding hands, Paul reveals softly. The last thing they talked about was going to Speke Hall, a public garden near where they grew up in Liverpool, knowing only the two of them would truly understand the reference. We didn't talk about the Beatles or fame. We talked about gardening, family, love, the real things that matter. I could feel the peace in him. This moment gave Paul closure. When I left that day, I knew it would probably be the last time I saw him. But I also knew we were okay. We finally had that moment where we were just two mates, not two Beatles. There was nothing left unsaid. Today, Paul keeps George's memory close, often performing something in concert, starting on the ukulele, George's favorite instrument. Paul says George taught him patience and the lesson to simply, just be here now, Paul. He says that wisdom changed how he lives, forcing him to slow down and enjoy the present, something he never did during the crazy years of Beatlemania. In revealing this truth, Paul McCartney doesn't just honor his friend, he completes a life circle that started with childhood brotherhood and ended with forgiveness. George Harrison was a soulmate, a musical partner, and ultimately, a teacher. And speaking of Paul's most personal memories, if you want to know which songs from the Beatles' incredible catalogue mean the most to the man who wrote half of them, be sure to check out our previous feature. At 80, Paul McCartney finally names his 5 favorite Beatles songs. Click the video link or card on your screen right now to watch.